Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is shades of gray. We tend to get comfort from making things black and white, where we have definitive choices. And the truth is that so much of life is really in the realm of shades of gray. So we're going to have a conversation about that. Should be pretty interesting. Before we get started, let's take a couple minutes to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And when you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind, and good morning to everybody else who's joining us this morning. Great to have you here with us. And today we're talking about shades of gray. It's interesting. I think that a lot of us get comfort from making things absolute, from looking at things as black and white. And it's really rare that, in fact, that's how things are, that really things are generally more nuanced than that, than black and white. And when the nuance leaves room for all kinds of confusion or lack of certainty or doubt on our individual parts. And that's less comfortable than definitively asserting that something is black or white. And I think when we're willing to step into the realm of shades of gray, we can have a greater understanding for others, for the nuances of a situation. We can allow ourselves to step beyond our own arrogance about our own righteousness about a given situation. Because if it's black and white and I'm right and you're wrong, then that makes me righteous. Then I can defend my situation. I can dismiss you, for example. But if there are shades of gray, if it's a matter of, well, this perspective and this perspective, and how do we square them? What is it like to be viewing a situation that looks black and white from the other person's vantage point? There might be a greater opportunity for reconciliation, maybe, for understanding, for finding solutions to things that are mutually beneficial rather than a win-lose kind of perspective, because win-lose is black and white, right? That's kind of where our culture is oriented, right? It's either win or lose and no in-betweens in lots and lots of ways. You pass or you fail kind of thing. And I think we get to be looking at a bigger picture, at a more nuanced perspective, from a more nuanced perspective. And that as we do that, there's a certain maturity that comes along with being able to entertain seemingly paradoxical circumstances at the same time. And in fact, I think that being able to hold the paradox is something that then allows us to, or holding opposites is something that then allows us to evolve to another dimension of experience and awareness and evolution. And I know I've talked before about Carol Sanford and also Regenesis Group and the course that I took called Regenerative Practitioner Series. And we were introduced to a variety of different frameworks for thinking and for inquiry. And the one framework that I really connected with, that I have found so powerful over and over and I'm still exploring, is this framework called the triad. And it works like this. There's an activating force and a restraining force. In other words, there's an impulse to do something, and then there are all the obstacles, right? And holding both of these things at the same time, the positives of something and the negatives of something, holding them all at the same time, or my interests and your interests. When we can hold them both at the same time, what happens is that it generates a whole lot of energy. And if we think about quantum physics, what we know is that when you add, when an electron is in a certain orbital, and you add energy and you add energy and you add energy, and it's still in that orbital until all of a sudden the energy reaches some kind of critical point, and all of a sudden the electron pops into the next orbital. And so we can think about this shades of gray thing, holding these polarities as accelerating the energy, the energetic level, so that it jumps up into this other dimension that is the reconciling force. So there's the activating, restraining, and reconciling. And the reconciling is saying, hey, at this new level, these things become something else. These things become unified in a way, or reconciled. And it reminds me of I think it's an Einstein quote that says, problem cannot be solved from the level at which it was, and from the level at which it emerged. That problems exist on whatever level, and in order to resolve them, we need to go to another level, and that's kind of the reconciling force. And so when we are present to black and white on both sides, what happens is we can start recognizing shades of gray, I think. So if I have an opinion and you have an opinion and it's black and white, then the likelihood is that there's a whole other dimension, which we could call shades of gray, or maybe it's just light, that reconciles these seemingly irreconcilable differences. And in entertaining shades of gray, it means being able to get off our position, to get off our righteousness, let go of the righteousness and the assertions that we know better, even when we're certain that we do, right? And especially when we're certain that we do, that's when it's a really good indicator that it might not be a bad idea to step back and consider what it's like from the other person's vantage point, even if it might seem reprehensible, even if we have super strong opinions about it. And the thing is that it takes courage to do that. It takes courage to consider another person's vantage point, because it means we have to entertain that maybe we're not as right as we thought we were. And if we entertain that we're not as right as we thought we were, then that starts putting us in a place of less certainty. And when we feel less certain, we tend to feel more insecure and maybe even threatened. So it's a very interesting dynamic to be looking at what it takes to let go of our righteousness and to step out of black and white into shades of gray. It's not that I was going to say, it's not that we can't know. I think that there are things that we can know in our being, like we can know relative things. We can know relatively that this feels right to me, or this feels wrong to me, or that violates my values, or this feels out of alignment. We can recognize those things, but as far as absolute truths, it can be very challenging, especially in this time when things are so deeply polarized, politically, and especially. It's so important to find new inroads, new ways of thinking, new ways of being, because the polarity is only going to, it's creating more and more energy, right? To push things to another level. Maybe we need the polarity right now to come to a place of greater reconciliation or greater awareness. It's interesting because as we look at so many of these polarities, it's really hard to imagine that there could be any reconciliation. It's hard to imagine that there's any way to bring about a greater respect and connection between us. And I think respect is part of the conversation, because when people believe differently than we do, we often tend to dismiss them and to devalue them. And I think it's a worthy question. It's not like I have an answer. But I think it's a worthy question to be looking at. How do we find some kind of common ground? How do we find some common sense of humanity to be able to communicate beyond the differences, to find a place of greater connection? So Rosalind says, like the abortion issue, not to allow it at all versus being able to up to just before the baby is born and all the stages in between. Yeah, I think that's an exceedingly charged issue. I agree. And you have extremes on either end. And I think that there are places of agreement where we might be able to come to a place of respect and consideration. And, you know, that's such an interesting issue because, well, there's so many, I think what it comes down to in so many ways is we've forgotten how to talk to each other, and we talk at each other, or we grandstand, or we dictate. And it's founded in a lack of respect. And humanity, I guess, you know, because when we get in these arguments, we can often lose sight of each other's humanity. And the abortion issue is a hairy one. The gun issues is a hairy one. There's so many issues around how we're going to take care of the environment, and what exactly is even the state of the environment. And you know, it's sometimes it's just amazing to me that we get anything done ever, because people have so many radical disagreements and radically different perspectives. One of the things that Carol Sanford says, and I totally agree with her, is that until we do personal growth, and she wasn't the first one to say this by any stretch, until we do personal growth, we're not going to be able to change the world. In fact, that's one of the, before I even heard of Carol Sanford, one of the pillars for sustainability now, one of the sustainability pillars is consciousness. Because until we shift our consciousness, we're kind of doomed to continue, or condemned to continue the same patterns that we have fallen prey to, that have gotten us into the situations that we're in currently. And so we're due for an awakening. And there's a way, I hold that there's a way of being that allows us to find reconciliation, to find peace amongst us, to find pathways forward that are in service to nature and humanity, and to life itself. And, you know, it's interesting. I had a couple conversations last week, And I think we talked about the changing of the guard and how there's a benefit to the fact that we die, because the old ideas then can give way to new ideas. That as the old guard changes, the old guard that is holding fast to certain beliefs and certain paradigms and trying to perpetuate these structures, as that old guard dies off, some those beliefs lose their sway, lose their influence, and leave some space for new ways of being to emerge. And if those old paradigms didn't end with people, then the possibility of change would be so profoundly decreased and limited. So shades of gray is maybe the potential for change and transformation. When things are black and white, you're dealing with polarities. When you have shades of gray, you're dealing with a spectrum, a process. You're dealing with something that provides for some mobility, motion, change. And it's interesting to me that these notions of reconciliation, of maybe a planetary awakening, is happening in the face of some of the most extreme thoughts and paradoxes that maybe we've encountered. I was listening, this was so bizarre to me. The law that was passed by the Biden administration a year ago, that is being heralded as like the greatest sustainability legislation ever, happens at the same time that Biden is approving expansive drilling and just trying to justify that. Like, here's one administration doing two things that are opposite at the same time, to be expanding our fossil fuel footprint on the planet at the same time as supposedly trying to implement policies that are to combat climate change. It's insanity. It's insanity. And it is building this energy until something dramatic has to happen. It has to happen. It's so crazy to me, just that example. It's incomprehensible to me, actually. So much of what's happening is incomprehensible to me. It just defies logic in my mind, but it also is so so much this polarity, so much these paradoxes, and holding the paradox somehow opens a door into another dimension. That's the only way I can express it, is holding the paradox, as uncomfortable and maybe unbearable as it is, generates enough energy that we can pop out of that whole energy system into another energy system that maybe provides for different potentials. So shades of gray, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that that's part of what our mandate is to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and or at least being able to dance with being uncomfortable, not relax into it and ignore it, but allow it to energize us, allow it to activate us into action that's appropriate, and also into like a new awareness, a new state of mind, a new way of thinking, a new way of being. And that's really what we talk about here on a daily basis is, how do we, what is this new way of being that we're called into in this emergent future? So with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And as always, it is my pleasure and privilege to have the opportunity to share these musings and conversations, and to be exploring new ways of thinking and being with you. And I'm so grateful. So until next time.